Hello, everybody. This is Figuring It Out, a show where we just need something to do after our kids go to bed. So we do this together. But no, we're trying to showcase how we process things and interact on different subjects, and as individuals or as a couple or as parents, the things we're processing, because I'm guessing that they're actually similar to things that most people interact with. And today what we want to explore is, so next week we will have been married for 10 years. So July 1st is our anniversary. And we were reflecting on how over the past 10 years, we've had a lot of different people in our life. And there's still a lot of people in our life, but how so many of those relationships are different than how they were at one point. So there's people who, when we were in college, we were really close, and maybe we'll talk to them once a year now. Or people when we first moved back to Toledo from California, who we were close with, and then, we don't see as much, or just like our friend group even, or our families, and the relationships seem to change. And so today we're going to try to talk about why we think that happens, and more so what we do about that and how we've wrestled with that reality. But just to get things started, something that you've figured out this. I'll fix that. Hold on. There we go. Something that you figured out. You've had an interesting past couple of weeks.
Yes, so I have been pretty sick, probably the most sick I've been in a while. And it's kind of funny, it's funny now, but it started off with my back hurting really bad. And if you know Landon's birth story, you know that that's how that started, was with this intense back pain. So part of me was a little scared that surprise baby was happening again, but it's not a surprise baby. But it kind of landed me on this. I couldn't do anything. I was so uncomfortable. And if you follow me on any sort of social media, you know that I work out pretty much every day, and I was not able to do that. I was barely able to lift my legs up off the floor. And so it gave me a lot of time to reflect on why is it that I work out so much? And I think I was kind of falling into this unhealthy, almost obsessive pattern of moving and exercising my body. And I was starting to feel like I was failing not only myself, but some of my clients and the people who message me and say oh, you motivated me to work out today. I just felt like I'm not being that person for those people. I'm not being that person to myself. And it made me really think, why are you actually doing this? Are you doing it because you feel like you have to? Or are you doing it for the actual benefit of moving your body? And so through all of this, I have learned that I can't treat myself like that anymore. And you always tell me you need to rest. Why don't you take a
freaking break?
Take a rest day. And I was like, no, I don't need a rest day. Well, this really forced me to take a rest day. And I think I'm starting to move into a healthier relationship with exercise, because I think I was starting down I don't want to say a scary path, but down a path that could be self-destructive.
Why? Why would it be self-destructive?
Because I think when you exercise for the wrong reasons,
yeah,
it just put you in a bad place. If I would have kept pushing my body and pushing myself to exercise, which is what I did on that. So it started on Thursday, and on Friday the next day I was like, oh, I'm fine, I can do it. And that's when it really was this is not okay. And so learning to listen to my body. I always tell my clients, you have to listen to your body, and if you can't do it, then you can't beat yourself up. And then I was in that position, and actually one of my clients messaged me. She was like, what are you doing? You need to rest your body. You would tell me this, so now I'm telling you the same thing.
You gotta be smoking what you're selling.
We're not smoking anything here.
Whoops.
That was bad.
It's a line that people use.
Nobody
Anyways,
says that.
Okay, so I'm on the other end, something that I have not figured out, something that I'm processing. The last 2 weeks I spent in Central America, virtually, of course. I didn't actually leave my office.
We
It's
still missed you.
part of my grad school, a cross-cultural immersion. And what was cool is I got to hear the stories of and interact with these people from Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Colombia even, and hear a lot of their stories. And the thing that it does to me, and this is going to sound really nihilistic, and I think a lot of people get frustrated when somebody communicates this, but I feel this way. I'm not saying it's true. That the more I see of the world, the less hope I have for it. And I'm not saying that experience was negative. I think that's a good thing to do. But that's a place that I sit is, I don't know that there's a whole lot that we can do to fix the problems in the world. And I go to a place of, I think when I was younger, I had these hopes of having a very large impact and actually changing the landscape in some way. And I've really resorted to, I don't think that's going to happen. And I'm acknowledging that you can't save the world. And so then what do we do? And, if we wanted to get philosophical, nihilism for me leads to pragmatism, which if you're into that kind of thing, all right.
I don't want to get into that.
But I can only impact, I think, one small place in the world, which would, be myself, my family, this community maybe. And so I'm trying to figure out what it means to accept the insurmountable nihilism of the world, and then also accept, like, what does it mean to do as much good as I can here and be okay with that. So that's where I'm at with that.
I'm glad you're back from South America.
Central
America.
Geographies.
Not my strong suit. Not my strong suit.
Okay.
I forgot where you went.
All right. So this is this is what we're getting into today. So why do our relationships change? And this is a common theme in marriage and families. You have relationships with different groups, different couples, different spaces, and they seem to change all of the time. And like I said, we've had a lot of different relationships. So why does that happen? And then how have we interacted with it? How should we interact with it? Are those things good or are they bad? So when you think of this question, how do you begin thinking about it?
I think if we're relating it to us, like right now, currently in our season of life, our relationships kind of change because of how busy we are. And we are, doing karate and baseball and t-ball. And so we're with like the same pods of people at each of these different events. And that's who we tend to connect with. And I think that's just because we're together every single night of the week.
Yeah, and there's something about proximity that
right.
The more you see someone, the more connected you are, especially when you're sharing an experience with them. And what'll be interesting is when those things change, so a season ends, like literally a sports season, or a school year even, that will then make the relationship change.
Right.
Yeah. But we've even had people that we were incredibly close with for a long time. And it's just weird to think about how they don't last forever.
They don't, unless you're like super intentional about making sure you connect and finding ways to do the distance thing, which can work, but...
Yeah. And I think about this, so there's two ways that I think about this with a family unit or some sort of intentional relationship that they have with other people, but then within the relationship itself. Because one of the parts of this is that we change, and yet our relationship does stay. I think one of the biggest issues with marriage is that we marry somebody for who they are, and then we don't continue to know who they change to be. We assume that the person we're marrying is going to be static. And so we're kind of assuming that change happens. And
let's just say, thank goodness, we didn't stay static.
Yeah.
Happy 10 years.
Yeah.
We're almost there.
One thing we're going to do on our anniversary is when we got married, we wrote letters to each other that we would read on our 10-year anniversary.
I'm nervous to read those.
I think it's going to be so dreadful.
It is.
I'm going to make fun of myself a lot. But as a marriage changes, couples who don't adapt to the changes, that ends up causing problems. Mm-hmm. Maybe the empty nest conversation is a good example of that. Is a couple doesn't know how to live together once a really drastic change like that happens. One of the lines that I use at weddings when I do them is that a marriage is the infinite mingling of souls. And the word infinite there is so important because it's going to be a never-ending process. It's a never-ending adventure that you're on. But you have to be intentional about that. And I often, I don't know that I often say this, but I think about this of a marriage is the only relationship that you have where you've legally vowed yourself to it. And I think that's necessary to have an intention of permanence. Or else, when things change, you'll just go your separate ways, which happens a lot. Mm-hmm. And so we have to, I think, accept the inevitable change that's going to happen with the other person we're with, because we're going to have to adapt to it. But when it comes to other people that we're connected to, you don't have that same legal responsibility. And so I guess one of the things that comes up with this is that bad then? When your relationship with other people around you changes, and it especially becomes less consistent or less intimate.
Is it negative, are you asking?
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be negative. I think it's easy for it to become negative, especially if one side of the relationship is resentful or not accepting of the thought that there is change in relationships. Mm-hmm. Like for us, I feel like maybe, I don't know if this is good, but we're kind of used to that. And so kind of like you've said, like we've had a lot of different relationships because we've been in a lot of different places. Mm-hmm. And so we're kind of used to that change. But for somebody who's not, it could feel like, well, they're abandoning me or, Yeah. I think it just depends on your perspective.
That's a good way to put it. They feel abandoned. Mm-hmm. And I think the experience can be negative because even though, so there's a concept called the evolution of relationships that every relationship has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is like a moment where this person exists, so the relationship's begun. And then an end, though, we think of the end of a relationship as when it stops being the way it was, but that doesn't end. Like think of somebody who gets divorced. They still have a relationship with that person. It's just not the same. Mm-hmm. And so they talk about how the middle of the relationship is this really long part. In fact, most relationships don't end until somebody dies or you create some really firm boundary with someone. And so when we have a relationship evolve, we express that it's a negative thing instead of just acknowledging that the relationship's just different now. But it is still the end of something. It's the end of the relationship being how it was. And if we liked how it was, then we're going to say, well, this sucks, or I feel abandoned. Mm-hmm. I think we just need to do a better job of going, maybe it's not the complete end of something. It can still suck. It can still not go the way that you want it to go. But it doesn't mean the relationship's over, because it's not. Mm-hmm. There's people who, even in California, that we were close with, and we don't have nearly the intimacy with them, but we still have a connection in some way. And so the relationship still is maintained, and we shouldn't be so quick to judge that as a bad thing, because there's also been people like I think of Bryce, who was in California, really close with him, didn't see him for 8 years, and then saw him again, and the relationship was different, but it was probably even better.
Yeah, I would say so.
We had grown in some ways. So I think that's something. It's less about trying to make sure our relationships stay the same and control it, And it's more about just recognizing that this is a natural thing and how are we going to adapt. And I think of how much animosity people have, like couples have or families have, because something changes. And, we start pointing fingers and getting upset with each other. And usually the conflict between relationships is because people disagree on what's changing. Something
it's like when a couple gets married and the parents are not ready for that.
Yeah, couples, relationships fight because there's this change happening that they don't know what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
Conflict doesn't often cause the change, though it does sometimes.
Sure.
But our inability to adapt starts causing this issue where the only way we know how to take that out on the other person is to kind of be vengeful or have animosity towards them. That's where a lot of the negative stuff comes from. But so a question that So if you think of a relationship that you have, it could be a spouse or a friend, family member, or it could be like a family that you're close with. Think about what circumstances would have to change in order for the relationship to change. So if you have like that group or person in your head, what would have to change? Hopefully with a spouse, it's the only thing that will change this is if one of us dies. We're going to stay in relationship until then. But with other folks, it could simply be baseball season ends. And there's people who we see at baseball games that we're not going to see probably after that's done. Because the thing that causes the change in relationships is simply when your circumstances change. The circumstances are what create the space for a relationship to exist. And when those change, the relationship's going to be different now. But like how many people, think of like a graduation. The graduation just happened, right? And everybody's like, let's stay in touch. Well, none of them, some do, but people don't.
I think it's rare.
Because their circumstances are different now.
Right.
And the relationship is different. And we don't know how to interact with that. I think at the end of the day, we just have to be able to go like, hey, it sucks that we're not as close as we were, but that doesn't mean like something bad happened.
Right.
Sometimes that's just the complexity of the world that we live in.
I don't think it means you can't be close again.
Sure.
At some point in time.
Yeah, I think there's always hope for that who knows what will happen. But we got to stop saying this bad thing happened and now we're not close. It's just, circumstances change. So maybe we just need to change our language about that.
Sure.
About how that goes. But anything else on that?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay. So that's it for this question. Why do our relationships change? If you want to continue to have some conversation, or you have any questions in the comments, or you want to, enlighten us with something that we missed as young, idealistic, only been married for 10 years people, we can stick around for a few more minutes. And I see we got some
laughing.
Is that a laugh?
Yeah, I think so. Oh
okay.
boy.
All right, so we got some comments here that we need to catch up on. So
I always look. Okay. Oh, Lisa.
I apologize. Some of these were posted a bit ago, and we're just now seeing them. These are good comments.
They are good comments.
Retirement changes things. Yeah, so Amy, your comment reminds me of something that I bring up sometimes about my dad. Not like how he fits into this, but when my dad, I'd go somewhere with my dad. We'd look at, there'd be like tile work, and my dad is a tiler. My name's Tyler. That's funny.
Because you're not a Tyler.
No, I ain't good at it. But he would always, like, I look at it and was like, yeah, it's tile. And he would go, man, look at that. See how that grouts off there? Something little. And there's something about your closeness to something allows you to see more of the messiness of it. Same with relationships. And I think one of the issues that people have that changes them is that they get close, so close that they see the inequities of the other. And that leads them to go, and this is kind of what we talked about the last episode of, so I'm just going to leave this. The problem is when that happens in a marriage, because a marriage you're saying, I'm going to see all of this other person, and I've said I'm not going to leave. So how do you interact with that? But yeah, that's something that...
Can we do a fun fact about your dad?
Yeah, fun fact.
Fun fact about Dave Kleberger. He's going to love this. I hope he's probably not watching. He tiled what did he tile? The big, what's it called? The cafe? I don't know what it's called. At the zoo, the big like cafe place.
That's Toledo Zoo, yeah.
He tiled that. And he tells us every time he goes to the zoo with us. And every time we go, we tell the boys, Poppy tiled that. Fun fact.
I like that comment, Tracy. That's kind of the example of what this is. So the one thing I'd add then is everybody in our generation, it feels like, talks about community. And, I want to be in community. I'm looking for community. And, to Amy's comment, they don't realize that that's a really messy thing. You're inviting someone into the... Oh my gosh.
Uh-oh. Did it cut us off?
Yeah, hold on here. Yeah, so I'll finish this thought with this screen up.
They can still see us, which probably is a terrible angle. I'm really sorry.
So with community, and one, it's really messy. But the other thing with community is that unless you have some sort of intention of permanence, it won't last. And so people wonder why these intentional communities or these really close relationships in churches or small communities and things are negatively affected. It's because there's no intention of permanence. And so like when I talk about community, there's 4 ingredients: permanence, shared vision, shared history, and proximity. And permanence is really necessary. And one way we've talked to some people in our lives is we've used the language, and this comes from the evolution of relationships I talked about, which is a communication psychological theory, that I'm willing to bury you. Are you willing to bury me? And that's saying I'm going to be here, a part of your life until it ends. And that's going to be the final change. But through all these changes, I'm going to stick with you. So that's something that I think is really important to think about as you think about these relationships that you want to maintain. If that makes sense.
Yes. I'm glad you can see the graphic and not us.
Why?
Because this angle from down here would be so bad.
Oh, yeah. No.
We also don't look anything like those pictures of us right now. That's how short your facial hair should be.
All right. I'm going to shut this down now. If any of y'all have questions or thoughts or comments or things that you want to talk about or things that you want to watch us figure out live, let us know. We're into that. We're literally, the reason we do this is this gives us something to do together. And we haven't talked about this, but I have noticed that our relationship has improved by having a common thing we're doing and a space where it's forcing us to talk about things that we might not ordinarily talk about. So I don't want you all to think that we're so pretentious that we think the world's supposed to listen to us. We're primarily doing this for us. So if you can give us some fodder to enliven the process, that would be awesome. With that being said, thank you everyone who watched. I hope this was beneficial to you in some way, but hopefully we'll see you next time.